I was told that many of y'all are looking to gain entrance into the data world a little bit and are trying to move towards that, or at least elevating your abilities. So I'm going to start and tell you a little bit about what I know. Tell you a little bit about how I ended up in data, which is a little bit, it's a bit roundabout. My analytics and data journey really starts back in when I was in middle school and high school. I happened to have some really phenomenal math teachers that made a big difference in my life, gave me a real interest in numbers and helped me see how problem solving could be impactful. I was on the math team. I did math about 2.5 hours a day in class, plus extra outside of that. That led to an education focused in engineering. All of my degrees are in electrical engineering. I was attracted to engineering for two main reasons. One was because of the math. I thought math was wonderful. And so any elective there was that I could take and get away with it, I took a math class. Yes, I do understand exactly how nerdy that makes me, but it was a great, it worked out well for me. After I finished my master's degree, I started working at this company called InfoWorks. It was the job I could find. I did not love it, as far as I did not want the job because it was programming. I didn't really want a programming job. I was insulted by that because I was an electrical engineer. And I thought that was not right, but I ended up loving the company. I really liked the company itself. And so stayed there for a while, but still wanted to go back and get my PhD. During my research for both my master's and my PhD work, I worked in my research area was radiation effects on microelectronics, which I noticed that none of y'all mentioned. I'm just heartbroken that none of y'all do study radiation for a career. But that was what I did. It was the one that was available to me and it worked out well. But really what it was at its core was using data. We would generate these massive swaths of data for reasons that it's outside of the scope of this conversation. We would generate these massive swaths of data and analyze it using topical knowledge to come up with insights. Now, does that sound familiar to any of you? It was data science before I knew there was such a thing. Turns out when I first got into it, I don't think data science was really a thing. I'm old enough that it was not really a thing then. But as I moved on, it became a thing. And so after I finished up my PhD and was teaching for a while, I started realizing that I really liked the analysis part more than I liked the radiation effects. Now, I think radiation effects is a wonderful area, but I loved the analysis, and it was the problem solving and the mathematical background that enabled me to spend time analyzing data. So when I came to data science, I didn't have a degree in it. I had a degree obviously in engineering, which misses part of it. I had not learned Python. I had not learned R. I did know SQL, but I learned SQL at work. I did not learn that in my educational background. There were several things I knew how to do, but there was a whole list, a laundry list of things that I did not know how to do. And there's still some things that I'm learning. Sierra has greater skill than I do in several areas. And most of the people I work with have greater skill than I do in their various different areas of expertise. I think that's one of the things that really helps us in the data world because it's a really broad area. I heard a couple of y'all's descriptions. I don't remember exactly who, but one of you sounds like a classic data engineer. Loves ETL process, likes getting the mess out of the data, making it clean and pretty and usable. But there's more to data than just cleaning the data. Now, I do not want to undervalue that. That's a significant portion of the whole data process is getting the data clean. I've heard it said that around 80% of a data science project is cleaning the data. So please do not hear me discounting the very important work that data engineers do. I have also heard it said that data engineering is one of the next places that data will advance. is because of the effort that will be put into the data engineering will support the rest of it. But there's a lot to work in the data science area. Some of the areas that I did not realize were important, I'll pick on one. Change management. Anybody learn about change management in your data science boot camps or in your data science programs?
That was actually something I recently finished my second bachelor's in healthcare management. And you said change management?
Yes, change
I think
management.
that was in one of our management and leadership classes. Yeah, but not in any of my data analytics education, but in my business school.
Okay, it was something that I had not really heard about. It was, I mean,
Right.
like I came by engineering, obviously. I avoided English classes, history classes, philosophy classes, any class that didn't have a definitive answer,
Mhm.
and business classes as a whole. All of those were, no, I did not take those unless absolutely required to. Particularly the history and English classes. I like history, but the classes terrify me because there's not a distinctive right answer. Um, I don't know if that scares the rest of you, but it does me. But one of the things about change management, when I came back to InfoWorks after being a professor for a while, it was an area that I had heard about it before, but I really became more introduced to it at the time. Change management is at its core, and I'm not an expert in this area, but it's helping people migrate and manage change in an organization. It turns out a whole field of effort. Any ideas why that particular one is important in data?
I'll say I worked as a contractor on a change management program.
Yeah.
And so they looked at the numbers. Data was always included in like our monthly presentations. And they
Yes.
were looking at the number to judge culture, judge how people were responding to
Yes.
internal changes, looking at surveys, seeing how responsive people were. And so they used all of that to get feedback and to make assumptions about how long will it take for this department to adopt this type of technology? How long, what decisions, how will these changes influence our culture? What percent of people are interacting with the new website that's
Yes.
introducing a lot of things. So we used it a lot on the communication side, judging the program to see how the changes were not going to impact adoption, but also internal culture.
You're exactly right. Change management is very important in helping people adjust to a new concept. One of the areas that scares people the most in life is change. The next one, probably not in order, obviously, and there are other areas, but numbers as a whole scare people. Let me give you an illustration. A few years ago, I was in Disney World. I have 3 kids, so anyway, we were in Disney World, and we rode a ride called the Tower of Terror. I don't know if any of y'all have ever ridden it, but it's basically a up and down kind of ride, and it's Disney, so they try and wrap a story around it, and it's based on the Twilight Zone. So you go up and they have this little story, and then they take you through. You're in a car of sorts, and they take you through this room that's supposed to be a scary room, not like terrifying, but it's supposed to spook you a little bit. And they have things in the room like an oversized eyelid on one side, and they have various different floaty ghost looking things. And one of the things they have show up is a math equation. And I had ridden the ride before, but that one particular time I looked up, happened to see it, and was thoroughly offended. But Disney is good at that sort of thing. They're sharp at telling stories. This is not their first time to tell a story. They're actually rather famous for it, as y'all know. And they chose a mathematical equation to use as part of the scary part of this ride. And it really just hit me upside the head of that's how a lot of people feel about math and how a lot of people feel about data. And so the idea of change management, when when a data project happens and it gives somebody some new insight, or they are it's brought into a process they're looking at, or there's a new dashboard or a new tool that enables them to use data. If somebody's not as comfortable with data as all of us are, it can be really it's kind of a scary proposition. And it helps them, change management can help somebody understand, here's how this is really going to be beneficial to you and how it's going to impact your life, and give them a little bit more freedom to understand some of those sorts of things. So change management was an area that I did not understand nor appreciate, but have come to know. Communication. Like I said, I avoided all writing classes. Well, engineers are not known for their great speaking skills or communication skills or presentation skills or artistic skills. I could go on for a while here, but nobody walks in the engineering building and goes, oh, these people, they know how to communicate with you. It's just not the case. So those are some skills that I was not as familiar with. Visualization is, who was it? I apologize, I don't remember your name, but the lady, you're a neuroscientist. I have heard a few talks from people who have expertise in neuroscience who are able to give really great visualizations because they understand how a person absorbs information. And so they're able to say, here is a best way for you to create a data visualization to help somebody absorb it. The ins and outs of various different data tools. One of you was mentioning about how you never get tired of learning new data tools, and of that, I knew how to work the math problems, but I was not as comfortable creating data tools or dealing with data tools. I had to learn Python. Some of them I know, some of them I'm not as familiar with, but there are a lot of different data tools. Just keeping up with the data tools themselves cannot practically be a full-time job. And in my current job, I did not learn about people or project management at all in school. At all. But all of those aspects are part of dealing with data. The reason I bring all of that up is not to say, here's all the things you've got to learn, because that would be frustrating, but to say, I would wager that many of you have existing skills that you can apply in this arena. There may be segments that you have to add on to. You may go, I really know this area, but I've also got to learn this over here. But there's probably not this massive suite of information that's just overwhelming that you need to know. I would say you probably know a fair amount and you'll have to add on incrementally, but don't let that overwhelm you or bother you. When looking at the various different places within the data sphere that you want to consider working, think about what fits your personality. Many of you hinted at what you want to do, or went out and out said, hey, this is an area that I find really attractive. But think about what you want, what you love, what appeals to you. Do you want to play strictly in data all day, or do you want to interface with your customers, clients, whoever those are? I speak as a consultant, I'm sorry, but whoever, whatever you're doing, you kind of have clients. Maybe they will be in your organization, but how do you want to interact with those people? Do you want to interact with those people? Do you want to be working at home all the time? What is the balance that you're looking for? Sometimes your personality will come into play with that, and your capabilities as well. The next thing to consider when looking for a data science position would be, what are your goals? What are you shooting for? Some of you mentioned it, but just to do a little bit of popcorn, what attracts you to data as far as what are your goals for your career there? If anybody's willing to answer.
So that's one of my biggest questions, because I want to know everything and I want to learn everything. And so I find myself going, ooh, that's interesting. Okay, but then I get overwhelmed because there's so much. And they're like, oh, wait, about what over here? So there's so many things to learn. Like, how do you make a goal? when there's so many different avenues?
There are a lot of avenues. I would pick one, but I would pick one, try and pick it wisely. You may want to look and see what positions like are available in the area. If you want to work locally, if you want to work remotely, look and see what positions are available, where you think the market is going, and largely what appeals to you. One of our Sierra's and my teammates is really good at visualizations. She loves it. She has really gotten into that work. She actually went to the Nashville Software School and went through that data boot camp, and she's very, very sharp. As a side note, the Nashville Software School is highly recommended by a lot of people. I was at a meeting for folks to help establish kind of a data sciencey program at one of our local universities. And it was a bunch of business leaders, and the Nashville Software School was recommended by the vast majority of the business leaders there, if not all of them. So a little plug for that. But she's gotten into data visualization because she has a little bit of a creative streak and finds that part very valuable. Sierra, would you mind telling a little bit about how you've gotten into your areas that you like?
Sure. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I went to college for physics. So problem solving has always been super huge for me. And right out of college, I got a job as a data scientist. And at the time, I didn't even know, like, I was like, I don't even know what data science is. Like, how am I supposed to do this job? But I was fortunate enough to have a professor that like recommended the job for me. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And I feel like it was just kind of a learning experience while I was working that job. And through it, I feel like I kind of figured out avenues that I was interested in. Like I worked in like automating pipelines, and I found that really interesting, like taking all this manual work that people were doing and turning it into something that can produce a result really fast and takes out all of that extra work for people. So that was one of the things. And then working at InfoWorks, I feel like it's mainly been like looking at data trends and trying to find things that way. So I feel like just doing like the analysis and finding things that are important or aren't important in different models has been really interesting. So I feel like I don't know, it kind of changes based on the projects I'm on. And so I don't know, I feel like what I thought I wanted to do, like at first I thought I wanted to go into visualizations, but now I'm finding like the analysis is more of what I enjoy. So I think it's just like trying different things and trying to figure out what speaks to you. What are you really like enjoying doing? What do you want to keep doing? And you might find things that way. So just like trying a bunch of different things.
Another aspect that might be useful, I know a couple of you talked about that you are working either a hospital or one of you works as a scheduler. Your expertise in the arena can give you extra knowledge that can help in the world that you might be working in. For instance, that might give you a leg up in dealing with HR issues in a hospital organization. Or for, like I said, I work at InfoWorks. We're based out of Middle Tennessee in the Nashville area, and probably in the data practice itself within InfoWorks, probably about 70% of our work is within healthcare. So having that healthcare knowledge and some expertise there can be a huge asset. So regardless of what area you've come from, your expertise in that area, your knowledge in that area can feed into your data career and could be turned something that you think of, well, this might not be connected. It really might be very connected, and you could use that as a stepping stone to gain your next bit of knowledge. As far as picking, Amy, it is difficult. I find that a lot of the areas within data are very interesting. That said, most people tend to gravitate to one of the other, some of, one of the various different areas. I would recommend maybe you watch, and you probably have done this, but watch a few videos online, see which one captures your imagination the most. But don't try and make a lifelong decision. Just make the next 6 months decision.
Yeah, right now I just found Microsoft Power Platforms and I'm having a
Okay.
blast. So much fun.
Well, that's a great place to start, and then you'll learn the next thing. But don't feel like you have to make a decision for the next 10 years. You're making a decision for, the next year or two. And then you'll learn a little bit more, and it'll grow and evolve. There are lots of needs in the field. Data is not slowing down. I try and avoid sales as much as I can. I get pulled in on occasion, but I talked with somebody who's interacting with the client executives, basically the sales folks at InfoWorks, and they said that almost all of the people that we're talking to want to talk about data right now. So there's no shortage of opportunities regarding data. And you have needs all the way from cleaning the data to finding the insights to interfacing with the business leaders. One of the major challenge points in data right now is the communication between data folks, and I'm making a very probably unjustified oversimplification, but you have data folks and you have business area folks, and not always do those two groups of people communicate. Now, sometimes they do wonderfully. Glenn, I can see you smiling a little bit. You've run into this once or twice. It's a challenging thing. It's just reality. But being able to have somebody who can bridge the gap. Tiffany, I could be wrong, but I bet you could. I can see you just in the brief comments. I bet you could do that. That's a huge risk point for a lot of data projects, is that level of communication right there. It's one of the top causes of data science project failures, because even if a project is technically absolutely perfect and it's correct and it works exactly as specified, if it's never used, did it matter if the data project got done? Probably not. As anything, it probably hurt the organization because they spent a bunch of money on it or invested time, but it never got to where it was actually something that was implemented and put into use. So the ability to communicate well there to help the project be productive is difficult to overstate in its importance. All the way to collecting the programming. So once you get the data and you analyze it, and you maybe do some data science on it, collecting that and implementing it to wherever it needs to be. Maybe it goes out to a visualization. Maybe it's incorporated into a process. Maybe it's incorporated into a data-driven process or program-driven process. There are a lot of different areas and a lot of different needs, and all of these shift a little bit from market to market. So there's plenty of opportunity, no shortage of opportunities. There are plenty even, Lindsay, in the educational world. I think you would run across a lot of opportunities where your skills would come into play depending on what you're looking for. But you could probably use your educational expertise to help give you a leg up in that arena. There's lots of different skill development, but all of y'all I had thought about mentioning, but y'all have mentioned a bunch already. Ivy, I particularly like your idea of using your skills to donate to a nonprofit, which also can help build your skills as well. So it's kind of a quid pro quo approach. I know we're at 6:47 and I have used up a lot of time, but are there any questions? If that's all right, Aman, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. If y'all have any questions for me, don't hesitate.
I'll just add, I'm so thrilled to hear you say this, because one of the ideas I try to get across to anybody who asks me is, it's not enough to say I want to do data. You really, I mean, there's data everywhere, and I think one of the things we need to do is think about that's not enough. What are my skills? What are my strengths? What do I like? What don't I
Yes.
like? And I think that helps narrow it down because it's a huge field. So
It's massive. And if I were to stick somebody, well, who loves data visualization and say, you know, we really need you to sit in a room and do this and clean data for the next however long, they're likely to hate it. And if I tell somebody who's accustomed to cleaning data and that's what they want to do and that's what they love doing, hey, you really need to give presentations on data all day long, they're gonna hate it. That doesn't mean that they would dislike the whole thing. You've got to find what fits you. And there's no shortage of opportunities. Allison, did you have a question?
Yes. I'm still trying to like define the path I want to take in data science since I recently graduated. And I sometimes feel like kind of intimidated by the job profiles I see. Like, how to kind of explain myself? Yeah, I don't know what road to take sometimes right now. It's like I get confused by what the companies are looking for and what I think I could do. Or sometimes I feel like, okay, maybe they need someone more skillful than I am. And I sometimes check my projects and be like, okay, no, I'm not really bad at this, but I don't have it really clear how to start sometimes.
Because I don't know you well, I'm not sure exactly what the issue here is, but I can tell you one that I have run across a lot is something that many of you know. It's something called imposter syndrome. Anybody ever heard the term? Okay. At Vanderbilt, I taught a lot of students. I would have well over 100 a semester at least. But particularly for the young women that I worked with, many of them would come to my office asking for, hey, Dr. Kauppila, how do I work this particular problem? And sometimes they would struggle with the actual content of the material. I mean, it's electrical engineering degree. It's not easy. It's hard. But for many of them, the struggle was not so much with the material. It was believing they could conquer it. So I generally, if I had to average it, about half of the people, half the time that particularly the young women would spend in my office, half the time I was convincing them they could do it. And the other half was telling them, here's how you're going to do this. But that doesn't, turns out, end in college. Women as a whole run into the same sort of thing when they're applying for jobs. Studies have shown that women are not as aggressive in applying for positions as men. Men, if they have on average, some portion of the requested skill set, will go ahead and apply, and women as a whole won't. So, Allison, my recommendation would be give it a shot. At worst, they say no. Okay. So they say no. You're going to learn something. And in the meantime, while you're applying for those and looking for them, you're going to be gaining your skills in other arenas because you're going to keep working and keep expanding your skills. And it's going to give you practice on what companies are looking for and give you practice in interviewing. So there's really not a downside. You apply, they say no, fine, you move on. But they might say yes. They might go, hey, you really do have the skill set. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, shoot, Miriam.
If I may add to that, I also found just by, researching a little bit the jobs and the different titles or so on, sometimes the titles are misleading. And sometimes you also see how like a certain employer will list all these things they would like to have in a candidate. And it doesn't mean that you have to tick every single box. You don't have to have all of those things. That's like their ideal situation, but perhaps you interview really well and they see way beyond just the technical skills and they see that you would be a great fit in the company, or they just see that you're just
great, they like your thought process or whatnot, and perhaps that's enough to get you the job because the rest can be learned.
We have interviewed, and I have seriously either hired or seriously considered hiring people with a varying range of educational experiences. My concern is not what their formal education is. My concern is how can they help my company? And so I'm not nearly, and I'm not particularly generally looking for a particular degree. I'm looking for, do they have the skill set needed?
Mm-hmm.
And that skill set might change, by the way. I may have a general posting, and that skill set may change from time to time because we haven't bothered to change the posting. So if we've done that, probably other companies have too. Yeah, go ahead.
So how would you identify those jobs? Sorry, I think I may have jumped ahead of somebody.
You're fine.
How would you identify those jobs that are willing to take entry-level candidates who haven't had as much practice and experience? Lots of job postings that I'm seeing have 2 to 3 years or more experience as one of the requirements. So I don't necessarily, I'm not opposed to sending out lots of applications, but I want to identify them wisely. So how do I kind of find that blend of what's the important thing to look for in a job posting that I would be a good candidate for, even though I'm new in the industry, or something that I should wait till later to apply for?
I would also look at the kind of company that you're looking at. Do some screening on the company itself. Look at the environment of the actual of the company. You maybe with a little bit of digging, you can figure out, are they the kind of company that supports training, that develops younger talent or newer talent. Some companies want people who have only been working in whatever field it is for X years. But to be honest, if somebody puts on there, hey, I want somebody with 10 years of experience in data, if they say, well, I want 10 plus years of experience in data science, I would take that with a big fat grain of salt, because data science really was hardly even called data science back in 2013. So most of the time, 2 to 3 years, they might be trying to get rid of people who have zero experience, but they also might not be. I will apologize. I have not looked for a data. Actually, I haven't looked for a job in a while, so I'm not as familiar with it from that perspective. But there are ways that you can get experience, and you can frame your, you have experience in other areas. You may not have 2 to 3 years of data experience directly, but you have other experience. And there are varying different ways to write a resume to highlight that. I would be careful though what examples you put on your resume. There are some that are classic examples from boot camps or from various different other classroom efforts. I would try and do a slightly different take on that, just to make it something that's new and refreshing, and that doesn't just go, oh, I did this in school as an illustration. Just apply it a different way and tell it. There's something, I believe it's called a functional resume, that you might find beneficial. Somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to throw out there really quick. So I was laid off from my senior data analyst job in June. I worked for a crypto company. Big surprise. So I just wanted to tell everybody out there, if you're like me and you're on LinkedIn and you look at an application, or you're thinking about putting in an application and you see that there's 2,500 applicants to that one job, that's like every job out there has a bajillion applicants per. The job that I found, I reached out directly to the person who was listed on the LinkedIn profile or on that actual job announcement. And I said, hi, my name's Amy. I've got really great qualifications. I'm super excited to meet you, and I really hope we can talk soon. And she instantly messaged me back. So don't put your application, just drop it into an empty, bottomless hole. Reach out and try to make connections because it makes a huge difference.
Wonderful recommendation.
Yeah, I was gonna say one question I had for you, since you're in consulting, I just wonder, so is there ever a time when you get tired of or just burned out from like going from company or helping different clients? Because I feel like I've been like a full-time data analyst employee for like multiple companies, and I feel like I get tired just from job hopping, just because every company has its own data problems and every like database management system is different. So I just wonder, like, do you actually experience any burnout from like going from data problem to data problem with the clients?
I don't, but I know people who would. But I probably lean more towards the ADD end of the spectrum. So part of the reason I like consulting is because I get bored really easily. And so for me, it's an asset, but it really wouldn't be for everybody. And that's part of what I'm talking about. You've hit on exactly when you have to take into account your personality. Like I took a personality, I have a lot of things that I know I don't know. And so I've retained a coach who is helping me learn a lot. And he basically said, well, of course you like consulting. Your personality says you would like consulting. So look for those sorts of things, because if it's the sort of thing that you are going to get burned out at, it's probably, if it's, because it can be like I have 3 kids, and one of my children would hate my job, like truly hate my job. Well, then don't get that kind of a job.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad you're paying attention to that, because you don't want to get a job you hate.
Yeah, I've thought about doing consulting on the side. I haven't experienced it yet, so I'm gonna try. I'm always open to try stuff and see if it works, see if it doesn't. But yeah, I just know that could be like going from environment to environment. It takes a lot of energy. So yeah.
It can. That's true.
Beth, did you have comments? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought at one point in time Beth was going to say something. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to chime in that one of the things that I noticed pivoting from academia and thinking more about analytics and visualization and consulting is a theme that I heard from folks who are struggling to identify skill sets is this gap in mentorship as you are on this path, that there's really a dearth of people who are on the other side saying like, here's where you're trying to get to. And then there's a lot of people who come off in sort of social media spaces and LinkedIn, like, hey, you have to do this and you have to take my class. And I don't know how much y'all have been exposed to it, having, as you said, not looked for a job in a long time. But it seems almost predatory in some ways, the ways that they sort of drive your insecurity about what you don't know. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm incredibly grateful to Glenn and the other folks who have created this space, that, you're not selling us your ebook, and you're not, having a course. I mean, I'm sure we'll buy your ebook if you have one
next week.
But I do want to just point out, it is different. It's a little, off the academic track that a lot of us are used to. And so I really appreciate you all showing up and helping. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy, very much. I had so much fun listening to you as usual. I will let Betty Ann wrap up this meeting, right? I haven't heard your voice today.
Well, that's because we had a speaker. Well, I do want to say again, Amy, I'm really appreciative of the time and you sharing your expertise here. I couldn't agree more with a lot of what you said. And I hope you all enjoyed, hearing these insights and maybe take it to heart. Maybe this will start conversations. I was really pleased to see everybody was dropping their contact information into the chat. So that's always a good start, I think, is to build community, reach out to each other, be supportive. And so, Amy, thank you so much for being part of us.
Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.